Here we go. Episode 116 here on a Thursday, May 23rd. It's Puck. It's Rob Staton here with you. Rob, of course, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. It's all brought to you by Superior Linen Service, family owned and operated since 1926. They provide the highest quality of products and service to the greater Puget Sound area. Get a free quote today at suplinen.com. Give them a call, 253-383-2636. Go check out Rob's work, SeahawksDraftBlog.com, best in the biz. His YouTube page, and, of course, on social media at Rob Staton. Rob, how are you, sir? Everything good?
Yeah, very, very busy. Very disappointed that the Vancouver Canucks were eliminated this week because although I am very much a fair weather fan, Puck, I did find myself, the lunatic that I am, staying up all night to watch them play the Oilers. So they're game 7, and I sort of worked myself up into a frenzy, ready for that, and then they laid an enormous egg in that game 7, and what a waste of time that was.
What do you get worked up more about? Is it hockey or the Seahawks?
Oh, it's the Seahawks. Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, the hockey's just kind of like, it's just because I used to live out there and kind of see Vancouver as a second home.
Yeah.
That and with the Vancouver Canucks being such a big part of that city, then when playoff time, I'm a massive fair weather fan. Like I just check on the scores, and then when it gets to playoff time, I jump on the bandwagon and hope they're going to do it. But it's the Seahawks. Like I live for the Seahawks. Like the Seahawks pop into my head all the time. Like it's my thing, you know. And as you can probably see with the way I've decked out my office, it's like my obsession.
Okay, so do you get obsessed? Like, I always make fun of the OTAs and just like they're running around in shorts. It's so annoying. God, I can't stand it. But you though, I bet get super excited about this. Like, you fired up about OTAs, or no? Are you more like, God, they're just running around in shorts?
It's funny because I was sort of seeing people who were there, sort of commenting on what they were seeing, and I kind of think, do you know what? You can't learn anything from watching these practices. This is the coach, Mike McDonald, said they're like 20% down the line of installing the defense. It's just a process. It's a process that, unlike over here, you would never get the media able to attend essentially what OTAs are. I to give you an example, there are 2 big clubs in the region that I cover, and one of the training grounds is it's like a fortress. Like you couldn't see anything. You would need like a crane to see anything that's going on in there. They definitely wouldn't let you in to come and watch any of this stuff. And if they did, they wouldn't let you see anything that was useful. So I don't learn anything from this. The only thing I quite enjoy seeing is Byron Murphy's arse and thighs are getting a good showing because all the cameras are focused on him. And every time I see him, I'm thinking, he looks a little bit more like Aaron Donald every time I see him on a video.
Does your wife know about your love affair with Byron Murphy? And if Rob, let's be honest, just you and me, if she were to know how much you fantasize about that man's ass and thighs, do you think she'd be concerned?
I think she'd say, if you're so keen on Byron Murphy's arse and thighs, why have you essentially not got either? Because as much as I go to the gym, I do a lot of working out, but Puck, it doesnn't matter what I do. My arse, basically what happens is my back just goes straight into my legs. Like there's no arse. It doesn't matter what I do. I do a million squats. That arse is not growing. So I'm very jealous. Maybe it's jealousy.
Have you thought about butt implants?
No,
Kardashian? Didn't one of the Kardashians do ass implants?
I think, for anybody who knows anything about the north of England, if I suddenly left my house with an arse implant, I'd probably last 5 minutes. So there's no way we're doing that. I mean, like, I don't know if anyone's seen Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones, like Jon Snow and Winterfell is based on the north of England. That's where I live. So there's no way you're not having your arse implants in there.
Is it pretty fair portrayal, Game of Thrones in the north end of England?
Some would say it's a romantic view of the north, but yeah, it's very much it's not quite as cold, I don't think, but the weather's more rainy and miserable. But
it seems like that's why you like Seattle and Vancouver, I think. It seems like the takeaway though so far has been it's at least what you hear from players and people there, very buttoned down. It's very serious. And not to say that it's like so over the top, but definitely a difference from what it was run under Pete Carroll. We knew there was going to be a difference.
And I'm ready for that. Bring it on. I feel like every time you mention this, you do have to qualify. There's no disrespect intended to Pete Carroll, but everything to me just felt stale and a little bit past its sell-by date for the Seahawks, and I couldn't handle another week's worth of videos of the Seahawks media team throwing out Pete Carroll throwing a football and acting like it's a great funny thing. I mean, to me, Puck, I just was irritated by it last year. I just thought I don't care about this
So
stuff.
when he would be in the khakis and the two gloves and the sunglasses, Rob Staton would be. What kind of emotion would that elicit?
It would elicit emotion of me shouting at the screen, "Fix the bloody defense, man!" How many years of I don't care. You throw a football great, right? Can you fix the defense? It was for years and years the defense has just not been good enough, anywhere near good enough. And it's refreshing to think that I was ready for something a bit more serious, for a coach who was perhaps not quite as charismatic in front of a microphone, to hear some different phrases, to hear and to see a different product. And it I think change was long overdue. And I'm actually pretty excited about what's going to happen over the next few weeks to build up towards this season.
What about how he and Gino's talked about it? One thing that's been a staple for the last 12, 13 years, however long he's been here, was the bag drill. Guys, the players jumping over the bags to hype up practice. That was a USC thing that then Sarkisian took to Washington. Carroll took to the Seahawks. No more bag drill. That must put a smile on your face.
Look, anything that is different puts a smile on my face. They had to do something different. I mean, I watched the Commanders versus Seahawks game this week because I did an article on quarterbacks, and I wanted to watch. Why not watch Geno Smith versus Sam Howell? So I watched it. The condensed version. I wasn't sat here for 3 hours watching that thing again. So I watched the condensed version of that, and one of the first series, I think Howell throws it out into the flat, and our good friend Jamal Adams sprints over there. I think it was, and completely whiffs on a tackle straight away. And I was thinking, I don't want to watch this anymore. I don't want to turn the game off now. I know what's going to happen. Howell had a touchdown where he was panicking. He's scrambling around, and he just sort of throws it up in the air, and someone the running back catches it somehow, and then just runs down the line for a touchdown. And then they did the exact same play in the second half and got a 30, 40-yard gain on it. And I just thought, I'm such a relief. I don't have to watch this. There may be other issues that Matt McDonald and Ryan Grubb have, especially in their first years. But at least they'll be different. It won't be. It felt frustrating to watch that again, and I always shuddered at the end and thought, "Oh, thank God we don't have to watch any more of that in 2024."
But you wrote about it. Let's go more in on that. The latest article, SeahawksDraftBlog.com, the quarterback dilemma facing the Seahawks and other NFL teams, and you got a picture there up of Jared Goff, and $212 million. He's now Jared Goff will average $53 million a year. Now it's not what Jared Goff is technically. No one views Jared Goff like this, right, Rob? But this is the market. The market is always what the market is. It's just always kind of the next succession of the next guy up. But this, my old friend, well, you know what? He's still my friend. Old coworker Hugh Millen used to say this all the time. And he's so right. Selecting and picking a quarterback is the hardest thing to do in professional sports. There's nothing else like it. And you could do a deep dive on the hits and the misses and who's successful and who's not successful in doing this, because it is so massively hard. And if you screw it up, especially early in a draft, you're screwed for years on it because of the commitment financially that you've got to put into said player. It's hard, man. It is a hard thing to do. And sometimes there's got to be a lot of luck involved. The Seahawks with Russell Wilson, I think we would all agree, right, Rob, that there was a huge element of luck involved in getting Wilson.
Luck is probably the greatest element that is involved if we consider everything, because here's something I wrote about. It's not just, finding Russell Wilson in round 3 and nobody else taking him and then him working out, or Tom Brady in round 6, or Brock Purdy with the last pick in the draft, and those guys working out. It's even stuff like the year that the Cincinnati Bengals were so bad to get the first overall pick was a year when Joe Burrow was going to go first overall.
Right.
And then when the Jacksonville Jaguars, they had the benefit of Trevor Lawrence. But then when they last had the number 1 overall pick, there wasn't anybody worth the number 1 overall pick, not in any other position either. They ended up taking Trevon Walker there. So you could be really bad and then pick first overall, and it could be a bad quarterback draft.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't, but then it could be a fantastic quarterback could be sat there at number 1, and you could get him instead. So there's always luck involved. It is, I completely agree with Hugh Millen. It is the hardest thing to do. We can sit here and go, just draft a quarterback or just trade up for a quarterback. But then, I've spent a lot of time, increasing amount of time looking at this 2025 quarterback class. And Puck, there was, I spoke to a former NFL GM in, I think it was January or February. And he said to me, look, anybody can watch a player for 5 minutes and determine that's a good player. The hardest thing to do is to find greatness, especially at the quarterback position. And he said even the most seasoned, proven, experienced GMs struggle to find that. It is the absolute hardest thing to do. And when I watch the 2025 eligible quarterbacks, it is really hard to see where the greatness is. There are good aspects. There's players with talent. Is there anybody who looks great? Not at the minute.
And that's where, and then you look at it next season, right? And you're like, if I'm not saying Seattle's got the number 1 pick, but you look at it next season and you're like, well, if you are a team that's desperate for a quarterback, you get the number 1 pick, and you look at that class, to your point, you're like, well, this is not the class that you want if you want the number 1 pick, or if you want a quarterback at the number 1 pick. So there is you're right. There's such an immense amount of luck, and it's just so difficult to find. And I don't know where the horizon is for them. I don't know what's on the horizon for Seattle. It doesn't seem to be in next year's draft, and you roll the dice on Sam Howell, and hopefully Sam Howell's the guy. Did you when you watched the game, did you change your opinion at all on Sam Howell?
No. I mean, he was playing the Seahawks, so that is a huge asterisk on the fantastic stat line that he had in that game. Like, two of the biggest plays in the game were busted plays. The touchdown right at the end, which tied it up, is a hopeful lob into the air, and it is just the most appalling defense you could imagine. And he had a bad fumble in the game. He didn't throw any interceptions, and there was a near interception at one point. I didn't come away from it thinking that Sam Howell is the guy. I mean, I read the PFF ranking that had Geno Smith at 18th in the NFL the other day.
Yeah.
And their sort of conclusion was that, he's okay. He could probably win you a game at any point. And when I was watching that game, I thought, I feel that way about Geno Smith and Sam Howell. They're both very capable of winning you a game of football, and probably beating any team, short of having to go into a shootout with a Mahomes. They could probably beat most teams and help you get a win. What I don't believe either are capable of is playing consistent football, and then when it gets to the playoffs, playing 4 consistent games of football, unless they are playing with an elite roster that will help you get to the very end. And getting an elite roster and making sure that nearly every other position is fantastic to accommodate for the fact that your quarterback is not an elite quarterback is probably even harder than having the luck to find the guy who's a great quarterback. I think it's on par with that. So I just think the Seahawks they're kind of stuck. Until they can get lucky or have an inspired selection or make something happen like the Chiefs did with Mahomes and the Bills did with Allen to trade up. It's going to be a fascinating few years to see how they're going to find their long-term answer. And I really hope that it's not the thing that derails a promising coach coming into his first job, that they can have a lot of good things, but if you don't have the quarterback, you'll always be somewhat limited.
What did you make it Russell being number 22 on that list?
Pooh.
What a fall.
What a
fall, man.
It's probably fair. Yeah, probably you could even argue that he should be lower. I mean, it's I hate saying that because, the corny side of Russ, I think we'd all kind of, some of it was kind of cringe. But Russ, I like Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, is the guy that was the difference maker for me. Like the Seahawks without him were a 7-9 team. And then once he'd figured out through the rookie growing pains, that was the Seahawks were so exciting, not just because they played good defense and ran the ball with Marshawn, it's because they had this quarterback who was just so dynamic and exciting. And for a period, people forget this now. There's so much revisionist history, but for a period of time, Seahawks Twitter was killing itself about let Russ cook and let Russ dominate the team and let Russ make every decision, let Russ make every draft pick.
Right.
It was everything was about Russ. And then it kind of just flipped as it did. And he had the injury and then the trade stuff happened and maybe some fans sided with him and he's moved on. And the Denver thing was a fiasco. And now he's going to have to try and rebuild his career. And part of me kind of hopes that he does somewhat.
I'm going to give you an exercise because I just thought of it. And this is right up your alley. I think you should look at, and you take the year that you want. Whether it's, and maybe let's use this as an example. When did the Packers, what year was Aaron Rodgers when the Packers drafted Jordan Love? I'm sure we could find that out. I don't know if you know off the top of your head. I bet I could find it.
I bet he was about 35, 36.
Okay. And then when Rodgers was drafted, when Brett Favre was probably around the same age. So we're talking 10 years in the league, maybe, for both?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, about that.
Or we can even say 8 years in the league. And go back and look at like when Russell completed his 8th year in the league. What quarterbacks were in that draft coming out of it that they still had him? Could they have later in, whenever, have taken a QB? Because I think what they screwed up, and I think what a lot of teams screw up, and where I think the Packers are the best at it, is they draft the succession to the quarterback every time. And look at it. It's just worked out well for him. It's worked out. I mean, we'll see what Jordan Love becomes, but there's a lot of good with Jordan Love. Yeah, he had to sit for a few years, but they have the guy now. And they drafted him at a time when they didn't need to draft him. And the same thing when they did with Rodgers and where they drafted him. They needed a quarterback in the first round, but they saw him fall and they go, look at this guy. We can have him. Yeah, we'll take him and then we'll deal with Favre. I think when they look back on it, I think that's and that's what's troubling with Schneider. And I wonder if maybe maybe he wanted to do that, was overruled by Carroll. I don't know. They should have done something like that, because then they would not be in this position and they could have had a guy and didn't have to play him right away. And now, and would have that succession plan. That if I was a GM, that's kind of what I would do and moving forward with especially that position.
I completely agree with you. I think, from the people that I do have a chance to speak to who've been in sort of personnel departments and have run things, there seems to be quite a widespread view of, and I referenced in the article I wrote that Michael Lombardi is very much of this mindset as well, of just keep drafting good players and that eventually everything will fall into place. Don't force anything. Just keep drafting good players, build up your roster and you'll be okay. And that's the way to do it. And I do wonder a little bit if John Schneider comes from that school of thought, that he thinks I just need to keep adding players, keep building, and don't reach for a quarterback unless I truly believe in that player. And that just hasn't happened for him, and it's bad luck. But at the same time, I do think you have to take shots. So I've had a look. I'm looking at this now. Okay. In 2020, listen, I don't know if the only quarterback that they could have drafted in 2020, which is 8 years after Russell Wilson was drafted, was Jalen Hurts in round 2. They took Jordan Brooks in the first round. They could have traded down and thought that it would have been quite a forced way of doing it. Were they ever likely? What was the feeling was when the Eagles took Jalen Hurts, and they did what you have suggested, Puck, because they had Carson Wentz and it was controversial when they took Jalen Hurts because they felt it would undermine him. But they took him in round 2. Would the Seahawks have done that? I'm not sure with Jalen Hurts, or whether you'd even want Jalen Hurts right now on the salary that he's on. 2021 was the year when they had 3 picks. So unlikely they were ever going to take a quarterback there, but they could have taken Davis Mills. He's not worked out for Houston. They've ended up with CJ Stroud instead. 2022, I'm just sort of scrolling through this now. So they had the number 9 overall pick, and then they had some picks in round 2. That was not a good quarterback class. And I don't think they should have taken it. It was a bunch of 3rd round picks. So I don't think there was anyone they could have taken there. And then in 2023, you could argue that, well, let's wait and see what Will Levis ends up being, because Will Levis went 33 to the Titans. The Seahawks had pick 20. They took Jackson Smith and Jigba. We need to see what Levis. I nearly said Will Smith. Then he's a very different person. Will Levis is, if he ends up being a really good player, that could be the one that got away.
Well, when was look it up. When's Josh Allen? When was Josh Allen drafted?
2018.
Okay, so 18, and then so 18 for him, and then Mahomes was when? Was he the same?
2017.
So I mean, even then, even at that point, so that we're talking, Russell is in his, with Mahomes, was that his 4th year? He had completed his 4th year, right?
12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah, 5 years in the league.
They had already started looking, at least publicly, at least, that was the word, that they were already, he's going out and looking at Mahomes, was infatuated with Mahomes. Now, maybe that's just draft stuff because everybody was. But there was a lot of smoke with Mahomes in Seattle. And then the next year, it's the same thing with Allen. I wonder if already he was thinking about that, because they didn't want to have to pay him the big money, and they knew what the recipe was. And the recipe was, get a talented young quarterback, build up the rest of the team, and then we'll play the few years under the rookie deal where they're not making money, and we'll win, and then we'll just recycle to a new one. So, because it did feel like they were, remember how controversial that was when that stuff came out? And like, even Seahawks fans were like, what are we doing here? We've got a quarterback. Why are we looking at other guys? Why are there rumors and reports of John Schneider flying out to Laramie to go check out Josh Allen's pro day? Because remember how much that pissed off the agent for Russell Wilson, how mad he got when he heard that?
Well, it's interesting because they had the first, I think they all spiraled down from that first negotiation after the Super Bowl with the agent, Mark Rodgers. And that I think everybody anticipated that was going to be a fairly routine, get the deal done, and it lasted forever and was a bit of a surprise how long it lasted. And then you had the second extension, the one where he was in the bed saying, Seattle, we got a deal. Remember that one? It was
like, Seattle, we got a deal.
Yeah. Yeah, with Sierra in the bed and
just
stuff like that.
So, God, he was an idiot.
I was in a hotel there, and I was just about to go to bed when that came out, and I was like, oh God, I'm going to have to write something now. But the thing is that, that they were so fat, and it was around that time, wasn't it? And I think they were sort of thinking in 2018, do we go into another negotiation with Mark Rodgers? Do we pay Russell Wilson to be the most expensive player in the league, or do we move on? And the thing about that 2018 is they couldn't get to Josh Allen, who went a 7th overall, I think, and anything like that. But they could have had Puck is Lamar Jackson, who was the 32nd overall pick. The Seahawks traded down from the late teens, I want to say. I think it was like 18, 19. They traded down to 27 and took.
That's the guy you pick.
Well, they could have had him 5 picks earlier. They took Rashad Penny.
See, that's the guy you pick, and you let him just sit there. You let Lamar Jackson sit for a couple of years. And then and then when you're tired of whoever it is, you bring in him. I mean, it's all revisionist history, but I'm just saying that I don't know. The more you think about it, I mean, that's, kind of what I think these teams should do. It's like
more teams are going to do this. Yeah. Penix is the start, I think. Penix to Falcons is the start. I think more teams are going to start doing this.
Now I get it. Like, it took me, I was so blown away and surprised what they did. But now more and more I think about it. And I think there's, including myself and a lot of other people, like, I'm going to apologize to what the Falcons did, because I think what the Falcons did was actually pretty damn smart. I think. And I just think that it's actually going to pay off for them, whether it's in a year or two, whenever that he plays Penix, but whatever. Let's say they get, Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. Let's say they get a good year or two out of him. Great. Hell, let's say they get a great year out of him. But then they see this uber talented kid playing quarterback for them, and maybe someone loses a quarterback or gets desperate for a quarterback and says, we'll trade for him, and they trade for Kirk Cousins.
Do you know what I think the adjustment is? I think the adjustment is that we've become so obsessed with the rookie pay scale. You get the quarterback in and you get him on the cheap, and that's the way you do it. And I actually think what teams are thinking now is there are very few middle round quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Like, you either have guys who go early, or you have guys that the league doesn't like. And if you want one of the guys that the league likes and is willing to take early, then you have to do it when you have the opportunity. And I think the Falcons have decided we do not intend to be picking in the top 10 anytime soon. We are going to take a quarterback. They might not even have had Michael Penix graded higher than Byron Murphy and Latu Latu and some of these offensive tackles or whatever. But we're going to take him because we think this is our rare opportunity. And I'll tell you now, Puck, that might be something the Seahawks rue down the line.
Sure.
That they have, they had top 10 pick with, and they took Charles Cross. And I get that because there was a bad quarterback draft. But a year later, they picked 5th overall and they took the best player on their board, which makes a lot of sense. It's how good teams tend to operate. But they also had opportunities to maybe trade up for a quarterback because they're 5th overall and it wouldn't have taken as much. They could have drafted somebody in that spot as well, or they could have drafted somebody at 20, and they haven't done it. And you just wonder if the Seahawks sit around waiting for the perfect quarterback to fall into the lap, it ain't going to happen.
Well, and with your glowing review of Sam Howell, what are they gonna do next season? I mean, now at this point, right, Rob, you're kind of hoping that Geno has a good year. So you can bring him back.
I hope Geno has a good year because I want to watch the Seahawks freaking win some games. That's kind of what I want. But I don't know, because the worst, I wrote this a year ago. I said the worst thing for the Seahawks is Geno Smith to play okay. You either want him to play brilliantly, Puck, and you can go, okay, problem solved, or you want him to be so bad that you move on. And what happened was he played okay. So they didn't feel any urgency to move on, and yet they don't feel completely convinced in him to commit to him beyond like another prove it year. And they can't be that in that place again in 9-10 months time. They've kind of got to have clarity on that. So my hope is that the Seahawks win a bunch of games, and maybe Geno can be the guy, or Sam Howell. I'm also secretly hoping that some of these quarterbacks that I've seen that I like can elevate their play, as Jaden Daniels did, in the last year, and that maybe we could end up with 5 or 6 quarterbacks who you'd be prepared to take in the first round. But based on my early initial viewings of these quarterbacks, I'm not sure that any of them, based on what I've seen so far, deserve a legit first round grade.
Hey, the one thing that there's not a lot, and you touched on it before, that you take out of OTAs. The one thing that kind of caught my attention in just kind of reading the recap of stuff was when they got to linebackers. And I think it was in Bob Condotta's piece of the Seattle Times, and he was just talking about, hey, they've got Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker there, but Baker hasn't practiced because he's had a wrist surgery, and then Dodson was limited for some reason, and maybe I missed it. I don't know why Dodson was limited, but they had their linebacking core, at least on the time that was open to the media, Rob, was John Radigan at middle linebacker, rookie Tyrese Knight, and then second-year linebacker Patrick O'Connell at weak side linebacker. And I read that and went, my God, if they suffer an injury to one of those two guys, they're screwed, because they have no depth at linebacker. And then now we're going to transition into, does it make sense for them? This is probably why there's so many of these rumors out there about them flirting there with Jamal Adams, because my God, that when you read that and you think that at any given time, John Radigan could be thrown into service, and I say service because he was in the Army, you're in trouble, man. You're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, well, as soon as you brought up the idea that, I just thought, I've got this iPad here and I'm just going to bang my head against it several times because you brought up the idea of Jamal Adams signing again. I mean, look, just on that point alone, if they think that, Jamal Adams is going to be any kind of depth at linebacker, the guy can't stay healthy when he gets to stand on his own and miss tackles at safety. So the idea of playing him up at front and having him try and run into, offensive linemen and be a linebacker is just, I don't get it. Like, if they think that, listen, he should have always been playing up at the line of scrimmage, downfield, because that's what he is. Anybody who watched him play for the Jets at his best, he was around the football all the time. And what the Seahawks did with him at safety was madness. And some people said he was playing well there. It's like, no, I'm sorry, you were getting no impact from a player that you spent what you needed to see. That you remember his first game against Atlanta in Atlanta,
Right.
and he looked like this guy could be the defensive MVP. Yeah. He needed to be like that. He needs to be playing like that every week, and he wasn't for some reason. But you can't just sort of bring him in and play him at linebacker now. The depth is a real problem. They are banking on their guys being healthy. You kind of feel, Puck, like they've got to do something there. I just hope it's not Jamal Adams. They need at least one. They need at least one other linebacker on the depth chart who you think, even if he only plays 4 games for you next season, he could give you 4 games where he's not a liability. That's kind of what they need. And if they have to make a trade and they have to go and sacrifice one of these defensive linemen to go and make it happen, turn a strength around and try and add to another area, then so be it. And I'm a little bit surprised that they maybe didn't do a little bit more this offseason to just add a bit more depth to that position, because they don't have many weak areas on the defense. But as you mentioned, that looks somewhat paper thin at the minute.
A question I've always thought about. The Seahawks have such a huge following over there in England. And I'm curious, do the Seahawks fans over there have the distaste and hatred, the sports hate, by the way, okay? Sports hate, not real hate, that fans over here have for the 49ers? Does it carry over there?
Well, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't personally know a lot of the Seahawks fans over here, but they're a growing bunch because there's, if we're just going to be really honest, there's a lot of 12 since 12 who,
sure.
have taken on the team since the LOB era, and since the Seahawks rise coincided perfectly with the rise of the sport in England and the UK and in Europe. So there's a lot of Seahawks fans because of that. My review of Seahawks fans in England and Britain would be that they're pretty, they are typical fans. They're not quite as passionate maybe as some of us are, for they're not religiously complaining about stuff all the time. It's a very supportive group, I would suggest. I have a running joke with Adam on our who does the streams with me, that he would put a podcast up and the guest would be, let's say, Walter Jones, and it would get 2 likes on the Seahawks UK page. But if somebody spots somebody wearing a Seahawks hat at a soccer game over here, takes a picture of it and goes, "Oh, look, another Seahawks fan," 100 likes. It's crazy but that's how it is in the fan base over here. But to kind of come back to the hatred for the Niners,
because Niner fans out here are annoying. Okay,
yeah,
are the Niner British fans annoying as well?
Yes, they are without a shadow of a doubt the most annoying fan base in the country with regards to British NFL fans. So what you have is you have a whole bunch of different fans follow their teams, and we're all kind of the same. And I can speak to, I know a Bears fan really well, and we always talk about how the Bears getting on. He'll ask me how the Seahawks are getting on, and you share that. I know a Cowboys fan, and he's very funny with it. He's willing to laugh at himself, but then he goes over the top in his sort of support of the Cowboys. But it's all great banter. It's fun. And then you've got the Niners fans, and the Niners fans over here are the worst. So what they will do is, I know a Niners fan. I'm not going to name him because he will get very upset about it, because this is, again, encapsulates how Niners fans are over here. But he's the kind of guy that will tweet during a game, "Brock Purdy's no good. He's playing like the last pick in the 7th round. He's awful." No. And then 3 days, when they come from behind and beat the Packers, 3 days later, he's having a go at some media guy who says Brock Purdy's not that good. I'm thinking, you were saying the exact same thing 3 days ago.
Those are fans, right? Here's the thing. You're a Seahawks. I mean, you're a Seahawks fan. You're an obsessed Seahawks fan. There is, all of us to a degree are sports hypocrites, aren't we? We are.
No. I do. Well, I can only speak for myself. If the Seahawks are crap, I like to think that I will say that they're crap. Yeah. And if the Seahawks are good, I will say they were good. But the problem with the Niners fans is they just, I don't know, they're really annoying with it. When things are not going well, they kind of go over the top with that, right. and then 3 days later they've changed their opinion.
Yeah, you're right.
And they're like that all the time. And they also, here's the other thing, I know a couple of these Niners fans. I know a couple of them quite well. So I worked with a Niners fan, and the Seahawks beat the Niners. And I went into work and I thought, you know what? I'm not going to bring it up. Like, he's going to be devastated. He's going to be really annoyed. The last thing I need is him having a meltdown today because I've teased him all day about the Seahawks being. It was when the Seahawks stopped. Did they stop? They were like, it was that epic game that went to overtime, and they kicked the last kick, like second, they kicked a field goal, and I think the Seahawks ended their unbeaten run or something like that. It was in Santa Clara, and I didn't bring it up. And then I think the Niners beat the Seahawks like in another game when I was working there. I came in on the Monday and he decorated the office in like the score and Niners win, and like everything about this was like about the fact the Niners won. And I just thought that's just so typical that when like the Seahawks win, I don't bring it up and don't mention anything. But my colleague was there and he'd made a huge fuss of the fact the Niners had won. So I can't stand them. And I'm really, really annoyed that they're as good as they are.
They are annoying. I got my buddy Nate. He's a huge Niners fan, and just they are very annoying. What I used to bust their balls about was how like, oh my God, when like a lot of people killed him for taking Trey Lance so early, and all the draft picks. I mean, all the draft picks that they gave up, and this goes back to our quarterback discussion because this is luck. They got extremely lucky on that draft. Just imagine if someone had taken Brock Purdy and he wasn't the last pick in the draft. I mean, just think about how much their fortunes as an organization changed. And you can't say, well, they drafted him. Well, they didn't like him enough they could have drafted him earlier, but they waited till the final pick in the NFL draft to select him. Now, imagine for a second he's not there. They would, I mean, I don't know what they would have done. Who knows? Now, maybe they would have, pulled off a trade, done something, what have you. It's all revisionist history, but they gave up a lot to get Trey Lance. And I remember watching Trey Lance and I would be like, my God, he's terrible. Like, what are you guys doing? Oh, he's going to be great. You have no idea. And then, Purdy would come in and I'd be like, this other guy is better than him. No, he's not. Purdy is just holding it down the floor. Wait till Lance gets healthy. And then as it became reality that Purdy was going to be better, then it was like, let's trash on Trey Lance and let's not criticize the front office for screwing up that trade, because that was a monumental screw up of a trade, but they were saved because they got him last pick.
Well, we go back a little bit further. They are on the record, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, in saying that they didn't even scout Patrick Mahomes because they had decided when they first came in that they weren't going to draft a quarterback because they were waiting for Kirk Cousins, who was going to become a free agent. And Kyle had worked with Kirk Cousins in Washington, and they were going to wait. So they took Solomon Thomas with the number 3 overall pick. Mahomes goes 10th overall. They then decide, because the record was so bad the following season, that they couldn't wait for Kirk Cousins anymore and had to spend a second-round pick on Jimmy Garoppolo. So they went in for Garoppolo. So they completely whiffed. I mean, imagine this Niners team with Patrick Mahomes if they'd actually bothered to scout him. And then, so they botched that one. They then give up a huge haul for Lance, as you mentioned there, get that completely wrong. And the Purdy thing has bailed them out, because if the Lance thing had not worked, and if their fans, and if they were wasting like the best years of Bosa and Kittle and Deebo Samuel and Fred Warner, their fans would be going, you guys don't know what you're doing. We could have had Mahomes, and you've traded a haul for Trey Lance. Like, Purdy really has bailed them out to an extent.
Where is Lance still in Dallas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think he is for another year.
Huh. What? I mean,
but I don't know. His name never comes up, and you would have thought somebody would have signed him, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
If he was, he's with the Cowboys for another year.
I don't know. Just always wondering what happened. I mean, when you look at him physically, you just think that,
his pro day was one of the worst I've ever watched.
Yeah, but physically, you look at him, you're like, God, she should be good. But that's a problem when you draft a guy like that. I just remember thinking that they were trying to have that Carson Wentz effect. But the thing with Carson Wentz is Carson Wentz played a bunch. This kid didn't even play at all. I mean, he barely played at, a Division II type team.
He had one game in the season before he was drafted, and he was awful in that game. Yeah. And here's the sad thing is they didn't scout Mahomes, and I think they thought, well, he's athletic and he looks a bit like Patrick Mahomes in terms of style of play. We'll take a chance on him being a Mahomes. It's like, well, you could have just had Mahomes
Yeah.
if you'd have bothered to watch
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. All right. The one guy I'd stay away from is Cam Ward. Do not get infatuated by Cam Ward. Don't any NFL person out. Don't do it. Don't do it.
He's playing for Mario Cristobal. There's no danger
He's
there.
going to look good in these drills and side. He's got a skill level and arm that people don't have, but he's a.
How good is he at the 4-yard dump off into the flat?
Terrible.
Because that's the Mario Cristobal offense.
That's the best part is he's terrible at it. 0 touch. Can't throw to the running back out of the backfield. So he can't execute Cristobal's offense. Okay. Oh, I know. I was going to wrap it up with this because I got a lot of feedback on this one. I want to know. I want a European perspective on tipping. What's your guys' policy on tipping over there?
Well, I really liked what you said, actually, Puck, because when I was in Seattle, I couldn't believe, firstly, how expensive everything was. Like buying a drink I was thinking of remortgaging my house because it was so ridiculous. Like buying a coffee was way more expensive than it is over here. The anything to do with alcohol was obscene. Like eating I just couldn't believe how expensive it was. And then every time you'd be expected to lay a tip. Whereas over here, the only time you tip over here is if you go to a restaurant, you really enjoy it, and then there's still no obligation to tip. Yeah. It's just your choice. So if I go out for a meal and the service is great and the food's great, I'll throw in like a 10% tip or something like that. That's what most people will do. And if you're feeling really generous, you might get a 15, 20%, depending on how much the thing costs. And then that's it. Like you don't tip baristas in the coffee, and you don't tip anything else. And when I went to America, if employees are not earning enough money at the prices that customers are being charged, that's out of order. So, sort that out. Don't rely on tips because everything's so expensive over there.
It's stupid. It's just and I got this one person was like just on me. He's like, my wife makes a living off this, and I'm like, I get it, but I'm just telling you that it's just stupid. It's just the prices of things now over here are so absurd. I don't have any more money to give you. Like I just don't have. Like I don't have any more money. You've taken my money on the $18 sandwich I bought. Like I'm good. Yeah. Like I went through. We had a baseball game last night, and I took my kid through McDonald's drive-through last night. He got a Big Mac, a fry, and a small drink. That was $15, and I'm like, wow, how is that $15? Like what? World is that?
What did he have? He had a Big Mac, fries, and a drink.
A drink. That's it. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's it. $15.
$15. Well, I've got to word this out. So dollars.
So how many? What's that?
To pounds. I'm just giving me 2. So it's $15. Whoa, that's like £12. I'm telling you now, if I went and bought that for my, it'd be half that.
Yeah, it'd
be half that
stupid.
Price.
And then I just, my point was, it's like, and because this last summer we were in Italy for like 3 weeks, and I was blown away of how inexpensive it was compared to where we live. That we'd go out to a meal and I'd be like the wine, all of it. I'd be like, God, I mean, there were some places that were more expensive, but for the most part, it just wasn't expensive. But then, and I knew this going in, and my mom's German, so I've been to Europe a bunch. I knew the tipping and all that, but it was just pleasant. It was nice that you weren't, every time you went to pay, there wasn't someone with a nose piercing flipping a screen around in your face demanding 22%. Like, no, you're being paid a lot of money now. Like the minimum wage is a lot. Like, sorry.
But even if that isn't the case, like it's not as if the people of, in your case, Seattle, are all, walking around like the Monopoly guy. Like, if you like, when I was in Seattle, I just thought, listen, I'm not made of money myself. Like I'm here, I'm buying a very expensive coffee, Like if you're putting even more money, like when does it kind of stop? You know, when because there's like a real cost of living issue around the world right now, and not some customers can afford it, and they maybe they should be pressured to
Yeah, it's
pay
okay.
a
I
bit
get
more. I don't know.
that, but it's like, I mean, I like to go out. I do, but it's just like I got to pick and choose my time when to go out and when we do. Yeah, I'm just pulling back. It's why it's a no tip 24 for me the rest of the year.
But
All right, you're the best.
it's good to know that we've got something right here in England.
Yeah,
I'll pass on the message that America is jealous
yeah. There's a lot.
of our approach to
There's
tipping.
a lot. There's a lot we're jealous of. There is Rob Staton, Seahawks Draft Blog. Go check out all of his work there. Also on YouTube. Follow him on X at Rob Staton. It's all brought to you by Superior Linen Service, family owned and operated since 1926. They provide the highest quality of products and service to the greater Puget Sound area. Get a free quote today, suplinen.com. Give them a call, 253-383-2636. Rob Staton every Thursday here at pucksports.com. You can watch it on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment there. Also listen to it on all the podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. You Android users, YouTube Music. They've got a brand new app that's out there. It's been out for a while, but it's a really good place for you Android users to listen and to watch the podcast. All right, Rob, we'll talk to you next Thursday. Thank you, sir.
See you then.